Okay, welcome. It's the WPIAL Blitz Show, fresh set of downs, PIAA podcast extravaganza. Wow, how about that? That's a mouthful. My
It
name's Bruce
is.
Badgley. Alongside me, my man from Fresh Set of Downs, Dave Mika and EasternPAFootball.com. My good friend, obviously, Ian McMeans, who partners with me on the WPIAL Blitz Show. And Ian, we've got a very special guest to start the program, don't we?
We do. We have, I guess I should say, three-time WPIAL champion head coach Brian Abbey from South Park. Coach Abbey won a WPIAL title and a state title as a player on the '97 team, was an assistant coach on the 2005 team, and now is the head coach of the WPIAL champion South Park Eagles. So, Coach, how does it feel to have done this now in three different ways?
It's exciting. Anytime you're part of a team that's able to win a WPL title and then take it all the way to a state championship, it's special. So to be able to represent the community in that way it's special to me, especially being from there.
That's great. And so, you guys, I loved your identity all year. You were a ground and pound, run the ball, play defense, had a great offensive and defensive line that really stifled some very good offenses. But, in football, it's funny how things always come down to like 1 yard, give or take. And you had a fourth down decision in the fourth quarter where, were you kind of going for it all the way where it was, fourth and one and you were like, we get first down here, we can kneel it out and the game's over? Or was there any thought in your mind about punting? Kind of what went through your head in that situation?
At that point of the game, we had a lot of success within that 3 yard territory. We've had a lot of confidence in our group all year, up front with our backfield, our quarterback making strong decisions. So when we get inside that 3 yard territory, we have a lot of belief that we can get it done. And the way that the momentum had been going, we knew that if we convert, it's over,
Mm-hmm.
so we weren't going to give them another chance. They have a lot of talented players. We didn't want to give them another chance with the football.
Yeah.
Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, I remember in 2005, where I stayed in Hershey, your community, the fans were great. How are the fans this year embracing your run in the state playoffs?
They've been there. They were there in full force the other day. I mean, it was fantastic. It brought back a lot of memories, of the last time being down there, time at Three River Stadium. We showed clips of the games to our players last week. And
Mhm.
they pan out onto the into the group back there and to see the community, like it gives you chills because South Park is we're a tight-knit small community, and it's special whenever all of our athletic programs are able to have success. It's truly a special thing.
So often, coach, I see teams that, um, emotions play such a big part of football. And it looked like you still have a lot of emotions in the tank. I was watching, your post game press conference, and you and your players, clearly, I mean, yeah, you just got done with winning a WPIAL championship, but boy, it sure looked like, in your eyes, you had work left. Talk a little bit about, how emotions are playing into your team's quest for a state championship.
I mean, I think, we all have a common goal, a shared goal that started all the way back, going all the way back to last November whenever we lost, in the quarterfinals. We start to set goals, and, as we started chipping away at everything, as weeks went on, you're having success. And, we kind of went throughout the season kind of, I don't know, not being talked about much, which was great for us. So we believed within our group, that we could go out and do this, and so yeah, as you win each playoff game and you have those moments, and finally we were able to get through and finally win it. I mean, it truly was emotional. I could feel it, within all of our guys, our coaching staff. You just kind of let it all out and enjoy it. So yeah, it truly was special.
Ian?
And this group of seniors, I think as freshmen they were 2-9 team, basically 2-7 team. Only won 2 games. I know that your stats and info guy shot me a message today. It was like, hey, that team, those guys actually went like winless when they were in seventh grade football. So like, can you talk a little bit about the journey that group of seniors went on from like going winless in seventh grade to a 2-win team as freshmen to now being WPIAL champions as seniors?
Yeah, when they came when they came to us, we had a few years where we had not a lot of groups in not a lot of players in each class, so we knew that we were going to have to play with some younger guys. So, three of our players, Wyatt Markovich, Parker Cunningham, Eric DeRue on defense, were playing as freshmen, starting as freshmen. And then we were getting participation from Kenyon Brown as a freshman. And then sophomore year, Antonio Lucas, he starts going for us. So, and Troy Cunningham starts as a sophomore. So that build up for those guys, starting those guys young and just letting them go through some growing pains and like having those tough moments, I think was important to them, important in their growth. And we've had more participation from other guys, and then now they've just kind of gelled as seniors. Now we're getting a lot of great participation from current sophomores now, in our junior class. So it really did. We knew that this was going to be a special year. It was just about putting the work in and getting it done, and they've gotten it done to this point.
Dave?
Yeah, and you're in the Final Four this year in Double A, something new, Southern Columbia out in my way, not in it. When they lost, was there a big reaction like out west, that hey, you know, the team that's won 7 straight state titles won't be there this year?
I mean, sure, like, yeah, we saw it, I mean,
Hmm.
there's been so much focus our way of just taking
Yeah.
things week by week and just kind of letting the chips fall where they may, and we've been doing a great job. Our kids have been doing a great job of just keeping everything in that small vacuum, and then, and we'll see who we get next time and prepare. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, we noticed, but it's just we just got to keep moving forward. We got to get to that. We got to get to that game first. So, Central Clarion right now is the focus.
Yes.
And they've
Yeah,
scored a lot of points this year. When I started looking at them, I was
Yeah.
shocked by how many points they put on the board this year.
Yeah, yeah, they're getting it done. They're getting a lot of yards. They're getting a lot of points. They have a real talented quarterback. So nice big line. So it's going to be a challenge.
So
and when
speaking
you
of the
do the
line,
scout, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ian.
I would say, speaking of the line, one of the things we like to do on the show is to try and give shout outs to, the players that don't always get the press. I know on your team, you've got 2 D1 linemen in the Cunningham brothers. But, Eric Drew obviously gets a lot of accolades and very well deserved, all-time leading rusher in school history, all that. But if you want to take a second, give a shout out to the whole guys in the trenches on both sides of the ball. We love to try and get their names out there too.
Yeah, definitely. So, across the board, I'll go left to right. We have Troy Cunningham at left tackle, Antonio Lucas or I'm sorry, Ian Hanna at left guard, Antonio Lucas at center, Caden Lemley right guard, Parker Cunningham right tackle, Wyatt Markovich H back, fullback, Harry Buzos our tight end, and then a special shout out to Sebastian Scanlon, who came in our short yardage package. He's always in on our short yardage package, but we used it a lot more on Saturday. So he ended up playing the majority of the game. And, for him to get that effort from him, he played a tremendous game. It really got our guys going. So, I mean, I couldn't be prouder of that group, and a shout out to Chris DeCovey, our offensive line coach. He's been with us. He coached me. He started with us in '99.
Wow.
And he coached the offensive line on the 2005 team. He's been with us throughout. So, shout out to all those guys and what they've done to us for our program.
Wow, fantastic. And look, you've got a lot of film out there, obviously, for your opponents to take a look at. Do you, cognitively, take a look at what you're doing and then, try and maybe do it in a different fashion? Or do you go out there and say, hey, you know what? Just here's who we are. Just come stop us.
No, you know what? I think we prepare for a lot of different scenarios. Earlier in the year, I mean, Robert's done a great job when it comes to running our 2-minute offense. We've done a tremendous job, I feel, this year early in the season. We've had the ability to start the second half with the ball many times this year. So we've had a lot of situations where we're getting the ball with 2 minutes or less on the clock, and Robert's running that offense, and we're throwing the ball. He's very capable of throwing. We prepare to have to throw each week, and it's just the way that the game plays out. So each of those games is unique, but we have confidence in our receivers, Kenyon and Logan Ludwig, Nate Walls, Colson Haynes, Griffin Burnett. I mean, those guys, we're prepared to use them, and we're prepared, to attack in that manner if need be.
Wow, fantastic. Ian, you have a final question there for Coach Abbey?
I think you covered pretty much everything. Dave asked the question about the community support too, and I went to a South Park game earlier this year, and I was super impressed by just everything surrounding the game too. The parents, the boosters, the band, everything was just like there was a great crowd that night and great atmosphere. You guys have an awesome stadium down there that had some relatively recent renovations to it. Just a great setting overall. So, congratulations, Coach Abbey, on being a WPIAL champion now as a head coach too. Best of luck to you this week against Central Clarion. Hopefully we're able to see you take it all the way and bring home a AA state title to Western Pennsylvania.
Oh, no, I really appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, Dave and I will be on the field there. So hopefully, what's been a reoccurring theme on the show over the years is the fact that all the coaches we've been able to interview here getting up to the championships, we've been able to meet on the field. So wish you all the luck in the world, Coach. Thank you very much, and best of luck.
All right, thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Thanks a lot. Just go ahead and
good luck, Coach.
All right. Wow. Great guy.
Yeah.
I mean,
Great
and
guy.
a legacy guy too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, having played there, then an assistant coach, and now the head coach. And Coach Abbey's only in his second year as the head coach. Now, obviously, he had quite a long tenure as an assistant coach, but nevertheless, he's brought that team kind of all the way back. I mean, they were 2-7 3 years ago, and now they're WPIAL champions. Wow. So
that's incredible.
Just that progress that they were able to make over time. And we talked about this, Dave, to kind of build off your question about Southern Columbia.
Yeah.
Bruce and I talked a lot about this on this show, that this was a year kind of like not the usual suspects, even in the WPIAL.
Yeah.
So like in the WPIAL, Beaver Falls, since they moved from 3A down to 2A in 2020, had made every WPIAL championship game in 2A. This year they went 0-10. So like the door was open for somebody else to get there. That it just like it wasn't Beaver Falls' year this year. And Seton LaSalle stepped up, South Park stepped up, and they had a great championship game. And South Park, they have their identity and they're just going to grind you down. And it's so, as an old school football fan, it's so much fun to watch. I mean, they're just going to get the ball, put together like a 7-minute drive and just matriculate the ball down the field. And it's so much fun because I mean, the way this game played out too, South Park scored first, Seton gets the ball, turns it over on the first play, and then South Park, Seton LaSalle, I think, ran one play in the first quarter because of just how much South Park had the ball. And then they're down 14-0 by the time they get the ball back. So, South Park played this game exactly the way they needed to. And that's what they're going to have to do against Central Clarion this week coming too, with the, amount of points Central Clarion can put on the board.
Yeah, but we've been talking about this for a while, Dave and I, on the Fresh Set It Down show, about the fact that you can say what you want about they don't pay attention to the fact that Southern Columbia is not in it. You know what? Everybody's paying attention to the fact that Southern Columbia is not in it. I mean, when the 800-pound gorilla walks out of the room, you sure take notice, and it certainly has. Coaches are gonna, the coach speak is. Yeah, they don't look ahead, but you know what? What they do see is the fact that if they can get by one or two teams, they have a real opportunity to state championship, right, Dave?
Yeah, I agree. You can say what you want, but Southern Columbia, year after year, they're gonna be there. They seem to find a way to win. It wasn't their year this year, but you have Troy who beat them. Could they continue that District 4 dominance? And they're looking pretty good.
Yeah.
so far in the East. So yeah, be interesting.
All right.
Yep.
Well, Ian, why don't you go ahead and take control here? We have one more guest coming up at the top of the hour, hopefully.
Sure.
Cassidy Woods from KDKA, but let's get started.
All right. So thank you everyone for joining us on this WPIAL Blitz show, kind of combined with Fresh Set of Downs this week for our state semifinal show. So you obviously know where to find us on YouTube and social media. My coverage on Steel City Blitz is pretty much over now that the WPIAL championships have concluded, but I know Dave's site, easternpafootball.com, is going to have a lot of coverage of the state championship games, so you can check out everything that they do as well. So talking about the WPIAL title games first here, 4 championship games played at the stadium formerly known as Heinz Field, now Acrisure Stadium. Thomas Jefferson Central Catholic winning their championships last week because of when they enter the state bracket. So this week it was Pine Richland, Avonworth, South Park, and Fort Cherry emerging victorious in the 4 title games. So we'll talk about those, and then we'll also talk a little bit about what's happening statewide. So we'll start in 1A, work our way up. And I mean, this game, it absolutely lived up to the billing of the number one offense and defense, in both respects, facing off. And at the end of the day, it was Matt Seg, the Penn State commit, making an incredible play to score the game-winning touchdown, or throw a game-winning touchdown pass, I should say, for Fort Cherry against Clairton's defense that had only given up 2 touchdowns all season. So for Fort Cherry to go out and put up 21 points on a team that had only given up 2 touchdowns all year was definitely impressive. But it was a total team effort, and I think the most impressive thing from Fort Cherry was the way they were able to dominate the line on both sides of the ball. Clairton had a ton of playmakers at the skill positions and a ton of speed, but Fort Cherry on offense and defense was able to win in the trenches. And Clairton's running game, they broke 2 big touchdown runs, had another, couple other long-ish runs, but for the most part, like, they weren't able to get those, 4 or 5 yard gains, those ones that help you pick up first downs and move the ball down the field. And on offense, Fort Cherry definitely, paved the way for Matt Seg in the running game as well, to get things done. And, Clairton's defense, a lot of talent, but at the end of the day, Bruce, as you talk about all the time, once you get so far into the playoffs, special teams matter, and Clairton doesn't have a kicker. So Clairton goes for 2 every time they score, and they only made it 1 out of 3 times. And that was the difference in the game, was 1 point. Fort Cherry kicking the, game-winning extra point after they scored that touchdown with about a minute left. So at the end of the day, Fort Cherry, congratulations, back-to-back WPIAL championships. Congratulations to Coach Gary and that program. We've had him on our show a few times. So all in all, a great story for Fort Cherry. Matt Seg, the Penn State commit, doing what great players do in big moments. And that's finding a way to win games and win championships for his team.
Yeah, and Dave and I saw Fort Cherry last year, in the state championship game. And they came up a little bit short, Dave, but I mean, your thoughts on Fort Cherry again. I mean, you've seen enough of these transcended players. What are your thoughts on, kind of Fort Cherry moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a huge win to knock off Clairton, and like you said, not having a kicker really could hurt you down the road. We've seen it with Newman Greta recently in the state finals. If they had a kicker, they're probably state champs. But I like Fort Cherry to get to Cumberland Valley and have a great shot at winning a state title. So I think the West is definitely going to be the favorite no matter what. Going to Cumberland Valley.
So that's a good segue into what else happened around the state, which is Port Allegheny, the District 9 beat Wilmington. And then on the east side of the bracket, Muncie beat DeLone Catholic. And the one that really was a shock to me was Bishop Guilfoyle just absolutely blowing out Westinghouse in 56-15. Westinghouse was in the 2A state title game the last 2 years, moved down to 1A. I think everyone kind of thought they were the team to beat in 1A, and then Guilfoyle just blew them out. So, Dave, any thoughts on those other teams on the east side of the bracket?
Yeah, I mean, you talk about, I know they're Western teams, but playing in the East. Yeah, I had Westinghouse, as a team that could win a state title this year, and Bishop Guilford, wow, they really put a number to them. And, I think they are the favorite going into that Muncie game, but Austin Johnson is a beast. He's a good running back from Muncie. Great wrestler. He's actually committed, I think, to Oklahoma State for wrestling. So a great athlete. It's going to be an interesting matchup. Kid Bishop Guilfoyle slow down that Muncie running attack.
Yeah, I was just as surprised as you, as I think as everybody was
Yeah,
by the Bishop Gil by the result. Maybe not necessarily that
they
Guilfoyle
won.
would
Yeah.
pull out a win, but so dramatically, and Muncie, my gosh, I mean. The funny thing was, I was doing a little research on them. I pulled up a picture of the high school. I thought I was looking at the movie Hoosiers. I mean, it looked just like the high school. They only have, I think, 130 male students in the school, and here they are in a state quarterfinal. So many great stories here. Port Allegheny, who gave them a chance against Wilmington. So I think such great storylines here in 1A as we move closer to Cumberland Valley. Fort Cherry trying to get it back and win that state championship. Bishop Guilfoyle trying to resurrect the fact of recent I think what they won is like 3 single A championships in a row, Dave.
Yeah, and then
Something
they had
like
to move
that.
up
Yeah.
to 2A. Yeah. I
Yeah.
actually have a slide on that. So hold on.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so
All right, there we go.
Let's talk WPIAL matchup first, then we'll bounce back to the state stuff.
Okay.
So this Fort Cherry against Port Allegheny matchup, Fort Cherry with the dual threat quarterback Matt Seg. Everything kind of runs through him, but they're really good in the trenches, and they're going to have to be really good again against this Port Allegheny team that really relies on their rushing game almost entirely. Aiden Bliss has 2,800 yards and 48 touchdowns, and then Tristan Kaiser with 1,200 yards and 20 touchdowns.
That's crazy.
Port Allegheny is probably not going to throw the ball a whole lot unless they get behind. So Fort Cherry needs to stretch this out early, take Port Allegheny's running game out of it, and then I think I like their chances. But if Port Allegheny can control the clock and control the trenches, this one could get interesting because both of these teams can score a lot of points, but at the end of the day, this one's going to be one up front.
Absolutely. And geez, those two alone, almost 4,000 yards rushing, 68 touchdowns.
That's
Incredible
crazy.
numbers. Incredible numbers.
I didn't get a chance to, ask Coach Abbey there, but when you're scouting these teams and they're running up these kind of numbers, I mean, how do they evaluate who they're playing against? I mean, that's got to be difficult.
I think that's the hard thing with some of the teams from District 9, District 5 in the middle of the state, where there's a lot of small schools. They're really spread out, and you just kind of never know year to year the level of competition till the teams come out in the state bracket and you actually kind of see them play against teams from other districts. But I think this year, we saw multiple District 9 teams beat District 10 teams. We don't have any District 10 teams in the state semifinals, which is kind of a rarity. So Port Allegheny is, and the other thing, when you score that many points in a year, you know how to put points on the board, right? That it's, even if you're playing against competition that's below your level, knowing how to score in a variety of ways is going to benefit you when you get deep into the playoffs. So I think at the end of the day,
it keeps you fresh too.
Yeah.
I mean, it keeps you fresh. Now, granted, they're 1A, and we talk about the fact that, 1A, hey, look, unfortunately, you're playing your starters because you really don't have that long of a bench. But it does allow, as you go later in the season, if you've got these blowouts, that that you can rest some of your players that way.
Yeah. Yep. I made a mistake on this slide too, because Fort Cherry was in the semifinals last year and lost in the championship game. So my bad on that one. Sorry.
Okay.
Ignore that bottom right corner. But we'll move
It's all
on to
good.
the statewide bracket. So this slide is correct. So this is Muncie's first appearance in the state semis. Port Allegany has never gotten past this point. They made it most recently in 2022. Fort Cherry has reached the state title game. They were the runners up last year. And then Bishop Guilfoyle, who you were right, Bruce, had won 3 straight state titles from 14 to 16 and then won again in 2021. The success formula forced them up to 2A the last 2 years, where they weren't much of a contender on a statewide basis, but now we're able to move back down to 1A and have basically picked up right where they left off and got themselves right back in the state semis.
That's some lofty expectations there, but I think you've got a team who's has a legacy versus a Fort Cherry versus Port Allegany and Muncie, basically pretty much. Well, I guess Port Allegany does have some history there, but Muncie coming out of nowhere to get to this point.
Yep. All right. Oh, sorry, Dave. Did you have any other thoughts before?
No,
that's
it's all good. Yeah.
All right, cool. So I have kind of a similar structure to this the rest of the way too. So starting with the WPIAL
bouncing
championship
back and
game.
forth.
Yeah. in 2A where I mixed up the helmets here. My bad. Okay. Wow. Quality control is not top notch on this week's edition of the WPIAL Blitz show. But all right, so South Park won. The score is correct. The helmets on the slide are inverted.
That's right.
At any rate, Eric DeRue had 158 rushing yards. But I mean, and here's the most incredible statistic. Like, look at these game stats. South Park ran more than twice as many plays, 55 to 24. South Park's time of possession was 36 minutes to like 11 minutes and change.
Wow.
That you're going to win most games where you run up those kind of numbers, where you're running twice as many offensive plays, where you have more than triple the time of possession of your opponent. And South Park, has never lost a WPIAL championship game. They're now 3-0 and actually technically 4-0 because Snowden won the 1955 championship game. So Dave, the history there was they were originally founded as Snowden Township, and there's a big county park there that's just known as South Park. And in the 1970s, the community held a referendum and they voted to like formally change the name of the town to South Park because that's what everyone knew it as instead of Snowden. So that is part of their history. It didn't merge with anyone. It's always been the same boundaries pretty much, but it's the Snowden became South Park in the 1970s.
Who knew?
Yeah. Actually, for the history buffs out there, that was also where the first shots of the Whiskey Rebellion were fired. But we can later.
Boy, so, we're learning everything today.
Not only am I a WPIAL history buff, I'm a amateur, just general history buff too. So on a statewide basis, South Park moves on to face Central Clarion, also out of District 9. They beat Cambria Heights out of District 6 after beating Farrell from District 10 last week. Riverside won a tight one against Williams Valley, and then Troy, who beat Southern Columbia in the District 4 semifinals a few weeks ago, continued their dominant run with a pretty handy win over Bedford out of District 5. So any thoughts on these games that happened, and we can get into the matchups a little bit later?
Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Riverside game, Williams Valley came back the second half, but when you fumble the ball 5 times and turn the ball over 5 times, you're not going to win many games, and that kind of doomed Williams Valley in that game. But yeah, like you say, Troy, they are just rolling, and I think they have a mission that their mission's to get to Cumberland Valley.
Well, and coming from District 4, I mean, they're carrying the District 4 mantle,
absolutely,
into there. But I think that there's a lot of pressure on Troy, and the pressure being that this is their time. Okay, the 1 year that Southern Columbia is down, they got to take advantage of it. And I think that there's enormous pressure on Troy to deliver.
I agree. I agree.
So looking at the South Park matchup in the, I guess, technically West Final, or state semifinal there.
Yeah.
This one is a bit of a different opponent than what South Park has seen. That Central Clarion has a dynamic passing game. We talked about Port Allegheny out of District 9, having those two rushers that added up to 4,000 yards. Well, look at these numbers for Jace Ferguson from Central Clarion: 3,000 passing yards and 49 touchdowns, and then almost 1,300 rushing yards and 17 touchdowns. So he's put up
incredible.
He's put up almost
that's
4,300 yards.
Madden numbers
himself.
Crazy.
Yeah, but it's going to be interesting to see how, with Central Clarion's passing game, how it matches up with South Park and what they're able to do, especially in the trenches. Troy and Parker Cunningham, the brothers, they play two ways. One of them is a James Madison commit. The other one has a couple offers from MAC schools, FCS schools. So, but at this level, at 2A, when you get two of those guys in the trenches, they've been dominant on both sides of the ball this year. And Eric DeRue is just a workhorse pounding running back that's just going to wear you down, and seems like he gets stronger as the game goes on. Kenyon Brown has been used in the running game, the receiving game. He's a kick returner. He's a really good safety on the defensive end too. So this South Park team, they're going to have to play their game. They're going to have to come out, control the clock, run the ball, and force a couple turnovers. And if they can do that, then they're going to have a shot to win this game. But if Central Clarion's able to throw the ball all over the yard like they've done against pretty much everybody all year, then this could be a challenge for South Park, because South Park's perfectly comfortable, like I said, 9-minute drives, 8-minute drives, just grinding their way down the field. But for Central Clarion, they've scored this many points this year. They can score quickly, which could create some problems if they go up by a few scores. And just for reference too, Central Clarion is actually the co-op between Clarion, Limestone, and North Clarion. So that's why I kind of had to, when I was counting district championships, I was like, well, some of those schools all kind of, participated together. But for all of them, this is the first state semifinal that they've reached together as a combined co-op school. So looking more broadly at the semifinals here, South Park against Central Clarion on one side. This is the South Park's third trip to the state semis, but first in almost 20 years. This is their first WPIAL title since 2005. So really, I think having Coach Abbey is a big advantage, because normally you would say, well, they haven't even been this far in almost 20 years. None of the kids on the team were even born then. But having Coach Abbey, who was on the team that won the 97 state title, an assistant on the team that won the 05 state title, gives them some experience for kind of how to prepare for games at this level.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. So what I've got to do, go ahead, carry on, guys. I'm trying to get Cassidy on our broadcast here. So
all right.
Carry on.
Dave, any thoughts on the Riverside Troy matchup and how they, what those teams bring to the table on the other side?
Yeah, I mean, Harry Armstrong has a really good quarterback that's thrown for, I think, over 2,000 yards. He's closing in on 1,000 yards rushing. He needs to have a big game. If Troy slows him down, I just think Troy will win big. Bruce and I have talked about it the last couple of weeks. Like he said, when Southern Columbia, when they knock Southern Columbia off, this is their year. And you're right, Bruce. This is probably a lot of pressure for those kids, but you haven't seen it. These kids, they're just taking 1 week at a time, trying to be 1-0. And I like Troy in this game. I like Troy to get to Cumberland Valley and see if they could win a state title.
Hey, Ian, can you stop the share for a moment? And I think that
sure
I
thing.
think I'll be able to let to get
Cassidy into the show.
Cassidy into the show here.
Cool.
So we'll see if we can have
Little
her
time
try.
out or first time out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
first
got
time
two
out
left.
here.
Got 2 left. Great job with your graphics, Ian.
Thanks.
Yeah, it has been fantastic here. With all of these items here, I mean, the statistics are fantastic. But look, that's the WPIAL Blitz show, quite honestly.
We do kind of pride ourselves on being the stat nerd show. But the other thing I think to kind of continue our conversation about the 2A, the 1A and 2A brackets,
here she comes.
Both of these state semifinals have teams from District 9, and District 9 is one of 2 districts around the state, 9 and 5, that have never won a state title. So
true.
These, Port Allegheny in Single A, Central Clarion in 2A are kind of not only playing for themselves, but also, potentially District 9's only had 3 teams ever make it to state championship games. So what if either of these teams can find a way to win, it would be a historic result for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Cassidy Wood from KDK TV joining
guys.
us. Hey, how are you?
I'm sorry, one sec. I'm trying to get this video figured out. Gosh, you would think after COVID and all this stuff, I would be like, so good
expert.
There we go. Okay. Hi, guys. How are you?
Hi, Cassidy. Good to see you again.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on. I will say, I told Bruce, this was my first football season here. So I was able to get out to the WPIAL championships and covered, obviously the WPIAL this fall, but it was my first season here. So as far as the history goes and all of that, I'm still learning. So bear with me. But yeah, super exciting games we had.
Awesome.
Fun.
Yeah. So of all the games that you saw, now a little background. I mean, Cassidy and I met actually at that the rain
delay
there, the West Virginia Penn State game. We got to talking there
for 2 hours.
Yeah, right, for 2 hours. But she's been a great athlete, but her dad was a football coach, so she's kind of grown up around football. And being your first year in Pennsylvania and seeing the WPIAL championships there, what do you think is maybe is there a big difference in how football is in West Virginia versus how it is in the WPIAL area in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, I mean, it's been really interesting. So my first job, I spent 2 years down in Beaumont, Texas, right outside of Houston. And then I was in West Virginia for 4 years and now up here. So the way we did high school football down in Texas was quite different. We had a full 35-minute show every Friday night, and we had live reporters out at games. It was huge. We covered on average, probably, 40 games, including scoreboards and stuff on a Friday night. But what's interesting to me is in Texas, Jerry's World, AT&T Stadium is where the state championships were played, and everybody, wanted to go there. And that's where they played the state championship games. Here, it took me a minute to kind of realize that the WPIAL is not the state championship, because around here they treat it so, it's so big. And so I thought for a while, it was the state title games, and it was just called the WPIAL. And then it was no, there's still state semifinals and a state championship after this. I was like, oh my gosh. So yeah, it is a little different. I think in West Virginia, just because it's a smaller state, we only had 3 classes until my final year there. They moved to 4 classes. And I don't know if you guys saw, but I guess this year, because of the reclassifications and stuff, they ended up pausing play and for 3 weeks, because they had a case go to the Supreme Court on because some teams were getting extra points because they were playing a 3A school, even though they were just a 2A school. So something weird happened.
It went to court.
Yeah, it went to the Supreme Court. So they paused all football playoffs. So in West Virginia, they actually haven't played the past 3 weeks. And finally, this Friday, they're going to finally play their quarterfinal games. Or maybe it's even their first round games. But yeah.
we complain about the PIAA. I mean, they're taking.
Oh, it's a mess down there. It's a mess down there. I feel like they just don't really know. Like, and I love the executive director at the WVSSAC. His name was Bernie Dolan. He was there for a long time. And like, I give him a lot of kudos during COVID. It was not easy, that kind of stuff. But man, just right now, it just seems like such a mess down there. Like, I still have friends that are sports anchors down there, and they're texting me like, Cass, this is crazy. I mean, we're 3 weeks, these kids haven't played. And then they were talking about potentially moving back the basketball season because so many of the kids are play on the basketball teams. So yeah, it's kind of messy down there right now. But yeah, I mean, I do think it's really interesting here in Pennsylvania. I think it's interesting that like the state championship games aren't being played at like the Eagles Stadium or the Steelers Stadium. I feel like that would,
they could have been played at Penn State.
Penn State
could have been.
Right. I know.
Bruce and I have disagreed on this for a little bit.
Yeah, I know. That's part of the Blitz show here is very much money factors. It came down to strictly a money decision pretty much for the PIAA. And part of where they had the championships previously were places that didn't necessarily want the championships, like Cumberland Valley. Hershey Park Stadium, they would host it. Penn State would host it, but they didn't necessarily want it, nor were their bids priced accordingly. Where Cumberland Valley, they really wanted it. The school district really embraced the fact, and they've expanded their facilities. They're kind of turning it into, a PIAA world, so to speak, because really all of the state championships, with the exception of basketball and baseball, unless I take that back, some of the spring sports are at Penn State, but in the fall and the winter, it's pretty much Cumberland Valley. So
yeah,
interesting.
So
but we thought we had it bad.
Yeah, straight up just didn't have football the past 3 Fridays. Crazy.
Wow, that is crazy. So what did you think of the PI of the WPIAL championships?
Oh, I thought it was awesome. Yeah, I mean, that Fort Cherry game, that 1A game was just so crazy. And I do feel for the kids on the Clairton team, because what's so crazy with them is, I mean, their stadium's been under renovation, right? So like they haven't played a home game all year, and to be 12-0 going into that game, playing only away games, is just so crazy to me. And so for them to, lose it because they essentially just don't have a kicker, that was kind of like crazy. But, Fort Cherry, they're solid. And Matt Sig, I actually got a chance to do an interview with him and a feature with him when he announced he committed to Penn State. And he's just such a good kid. And he's only a junior. So, they'll be back next year probably. But yeah, that one was very exciting. Seton LaSalle, that's also like such a good story. I mean, they were 0-10 2 years ago, and then to be there this year is just nuts. I was able to talk to that coach too. He's very military-esque, so it makes sense, that he was able to go in and turn around an 0-10 program in 2 years with how, intense he is. But he runs his program the right way, and those kids bought it, and you can tell. So but yeah, I think it was really fun over there. It was exciting. Some of the Steelers guys came over and hung out for a little bit. So I think the kids thought that was cool to see them. And yeah, it was a cool experience.
Well, I tell you what, the cool experience. Dave, did you have a question for Cassidy at all? You haven't really said a whole lot.
Yeah.
Sorry, I ramble.
So you were in Texas. How cool is it? 40,000 people, 30,000 people watching a high school football game.
I'll never forget. So it was 2018, I think it was. And our local 5A team made it. So it added a little something because it was a team that we covered very closely that whole year, but they made it to Dallas, and it was the 5A state championship game. And I just had chills, and my friend Chris took a video and he tweeted it out. I'm pretty sure it went viral, but it was like, this is not an NFL game. This is not, a college game. This is a high school football game in Texas. Yeah. It's just like all these people screaming and cheering. And I mean, it's crazy. Like, people drive all the way to Dallas and go there when they have no kids in the game. They have no connection to the game at all. They just go to go and watch. So definitely, a different vibe down there. It's their culture, but I think it starts from the top down. And I think, in a way, Jerry Jones has always kind of wanted to own football in a way in that state. And he was going to do whatever it takes to keep high school football in Dallas, like the championships and stuff. So, yeah, it was a different experience, though. I will say that. We had a crew of probably 13 people that would work on a Friday night between our photographers and our digital people. Wow. And, we had 2 anchors, and then me and my buddy Chris would be live at 2 different games out in the field. And it was just a big production. It was always a big production. And when I went to West Virginia and I got the sports director job there, my boss there thought I was crazy because I was trying to kind of bring Texas high school football to West Virginia when we really didn't have the resources or the time to do it. But I'd always be like, no, we need a minimum 10 game highlights. He's like, Cassie, you're crazy. We just can't, we don't have the resources to get that much. But so here, I'm hoping that here, we'll get back up to snuff here at KDK. I think we've struggled a little with resources too, but now that I'm on, hopefully we'll be able to blow it up a little bit more too here.
There we go, man. High school football coming back, Ian.
I like that.
Yeah.
And
high school football is just so important. I mean, it teaches these kids life lessons outside of just, the championships, which are fun, but yeah.
So,
and KDK has done a great job on the radio side too of kind of putting a great production out for you with their kind of signature game of the week. But it is always cool to have a game on TV too that you can watch, and having a post-game show and things like that. That being able to have both offerings is really cool. So as someone who grew up in Western Pennsylvania, you definitely hit the nail on the head that forever people in this area have felt like the WPIAL championships kind of meant more than the state championships. That may be changing a little bit now, but I think part of it too, as an amateur WPIAL historian, that the WPIAL championships have been around since 1913 was the first year there was a WPIAL championship game or champion crowned, whereas the state championships just came in 1988. So they're relatively new, at least in Pennsylvania terms. They're new, but I think there's a lot of history here too. And I completely agree with what you said about the importance of high school football, that I've always told people, if you want to learn about a town in Western Pennsylvania, the best thing to do is to go to a high school football game. That's absolutely how you learn, what's the traditions, what do they do? Clairton, when Clairton has a stadium, they have a parade up the street to the stadium with the whole school and the band and the cheerleaders and the football team before a game. And if you're an opponent, it's really intimidating to have the whole school parade up the street into the stadium.
Yeah. And I love that. And that's also why, I grew up in Southern California, and it was just not, I don't know, sports are not as important there, I think, anymore as they used to be, number one. But number two, I just wanted to be in an area where it was just prioritized a little bit more. I mean, I grew up in San Diego, and we had the Chargers when I was growing up. We don't even have them anymore out there. So, I had to leave. But it is cool seeing that, though, and seeing those traditions. And yeah, I mean, every Friday night this year I was out at games, and it was really cool seeing how people still come out and support these kids the way they do.
So what was your favorite stadium that you visited?
Ooh, favorite stadium. I mean, TJ's was pretty exciting. That student section at Thomas Jefferson, I mean, they're fun. They're a lot of fun. The energy in that place was huge. I mean, Peters Township, obviously gorgeous. Yeah, I would have to say those two are probably the highest. Penn Hills has a really nice stadium, but unfortunately, it just doesn't seem like a lot of people come out to those games. I think they had some problems this year too, and now they, it's just a little difficult. So the environment there, I don't think is as big as some of the other places, but I mean, all in all, you see the dedication there, and that's awesome.
Well, we're hoping that a WPIAL team makes it out to Cumberland Valley, hoping that you might get, a state championship assignment to do some highlights there. And then, well, I've met you in person, but then Dave can say hello, to you in person there. That's usually the times that we get to meet, the Pittsburgh medias when they come out for like the state championship games.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. We'll see for sure. I mean, I'm going to push for it. They're weird about our traveling sometimes, but sometimes you just got to push for it and they'll be like, huh, all right.
All right. Great. Well, listen, Cassidy, it's been a pleasure to have you on. And
thank you guys.
We've really enjoyed it. And see, we're making you, like, a Keystone State aficionado for football here now. How about that?
Oh my gosh. I mean, not yet, but hopefully one day. Like I said, one season down, hopefully many more to come, because I don't plan on moving for a long time.
Hey, all right.
There you go.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Hey, we'll have to make this a regular occurrence then, getting you on the Blitz show.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And thank you guys so much for reaching out. And this was fun. Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot, Cassie. All right, just exit out there and we'll continue on. Take care.
All right. Bye, guys.
We'll see you later. Bye now.
See ya.
All right.
All right.
See, I'll tell you what, look at there. We're talking about Texas. We think we have it bad with the PIAA. Oh, my God. West Virginia, what a wreck.
That's
unbelievable. I've never heard of pausing the playoffs for 3 weeks. That is unbelievable. But she's lived in some pretty good football states. California. I mean, when you say high school football, you have to have Texas up top.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
To have 40,000 fans at a high school game, that's pretty incredible.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's carry on, Ian. I think we're through 2A here. We got others to do.
Yeah, that was perfect timing. So we got through 1 and 2A, now on to 3A, where Avonworth won the WPIAL championship 17-0 over Central Valley. And this was a culmination for Avonworth of, not quite getting over that mountain for a few years, that they were a team that was poised to be there, right? That Central Valley, who had been in their conference in 3A, won, 3 straight WPIAL titles, back-to-back state titles, got forced up to 4A, and then Avonworth thinking, okay, Central Valley's moving up to 4A, now's our shot. And then all of a sudden Bell Vernon moves down from 4A to 3A at the same time, and Avonworth and Bell Vernon meet in 2 straight WPIAL championship games. Bell Vernon prevails, goes on to win the state title. Avonworth's probably sitting there thinking like, hey, if Bell Vernon hadn't moved down, like, we potentially could have been 2-time state champions. And now, Bell Vernon moves back up this year, but Central Valley comes back down, and Avonworth beat Central Valley in the regular season and then beat them once again here in the WPIAL championship game to claim their 3rd title in school history. So congratulations to Avonworth, finally, getting to the top of the mountain. And I love this picture of them celebrating with the trophy, because you can just see it in their faces of like, everything from the last couple of years of coming up short in the championship game, losing on that field twice, and now being able to go to Acrisure Stadium and win and hoist the trophy just means, so much to all those kids. And they really did it once again with their running game and on defense. Nico Neal, 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, and their defense, 8 tackles for loss, 4 sacks. Justin Beck alone had 2 sacks and 3 tackles for loss. So Avonworth, they don't have any like star players. They're just a group that plays hard together, and they can cycle through a bunch of different players. And I'll get to it in a minute when we go to their slide. But they cycle through like, 3 or 4 different running backs in a game, and their quarterback only attempted 2 passes in this game. That they just came in and Carson Bellinger's a very capable quarterback, but they're like, we're just going to come in and pound the rock and, cycle through running backs, and we're going to dominate in the trenches and, pave our way forward. And that's what they did to beat Central Valley. That's what they did the week before to beat a very good Amani Christian team who was undefeated in the top seed in the WPIAL tournament. And Avonworth just went out and took care of business in the trenches and let everything else, fall where it may. And now they're WPIAL champions. So looking statewide, Avonworth will now take on a Penn Cambria team who I think is the only District 6 team that made it to the state semifinals. They beat Hickory, who is the back-to-back District 10 champions. And once again, District 10 not getting a team into the state semifinals, which was a little bit of a surprise. And then I'll let you guys talk about the east half of the bracket here, because I know, Bruce, you and Dave have covered these teams a lot this year. Northwestern Lehigh for the second straight year beating Scranton Prep, and then Danville getting past Bermudian Springs. But I'll turn it over to you guys to talk about those ones.
Go ahead, Dave. Why don't you pick which one you want to talk about?
Yeah, I'll start with Northwestern Lehigh, 34-0 win against Scranton Prep. Scranton Prep's star quarterback, Lewis Paris, got injured, got knocked out of the game. Story of the game again, Eli Zimmerman. He had a long punt return. I think over 200 yards rushing. This kid has broken records in offense, defense, special teams, and he really has to be considered one of the players for 3A Player of the Year. I tweeted out an incredible number for Northwestern Lehigh. Both their soccer teams this fall, 28-0 state champs.
Wow.
Their football team right now is currently 14-0. So that's a combined record this fall of 70-0 with those three fall sports. They're 2 wins away from having 3 state titles this fall. It's incredible run by that school.
I did get somebody, Chris Elm, say that the Guilfoyle is from District 6. So
that's
there is
right.
one
that's
District
right.
16.
Yes, that's right.
So thanks to Chris.
Yes.
That's why we have the live chat. I wish more guys would, tell us that we're wrong.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I forgot about that. Guilfoyle's in Altoona. That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So,
but this is Northwestern Lehigh's toughest opponent up to date. If they want to get back to Cumberland Valley, Danville's standing in their way. Danville could throw the ball, they could run the ball. But what has stood out for me, and I have the stat, Northwestern Lehigh, they're only given up 5.6 points on defense. All season, only 6.5. So Danville has an explosive offense. If Northwestern Lehigh could contain that offense, I think they could get back to Cumberland Valley. And Ian, my question to you is, last year we all knew about Bell Vernon, great running back, some D1 guys, obviously won big in the state finals. Is there a team in the West that's like Bell Vernon from last year?
Not really, no, to be honest with you. And let's talk about this matchup here with Avonworth and Penn Cambria. That's a great segue. Avonworth, they came into the year throwing the ball a lot more with Carson Bellinger, and he's a very good, capable quarterback, but kind of halfway through the year, I'll say, they kind of switched to being more run heavy, and the Neal brothers, Nico and Luca Neal, and then they've got like a handful of other guys, Dimitri Valsarius and a few other kids who all take turns in the backfield. So they don't have any one player that has like insanely good statistics. They don't have a Quentin Martin back there who's a Penn State commit. They've got some good players and some kids who probably are, I'll say, maybe FCS capable or D1 capable at like a MAC school or something like that, but no one that's gonna just completely blow you away athletically. But they're just very, very solid overall and do a lot of the small things that it takes to win. And they're very well coached. Their coach, Duke Joncourt, comes from a coaching family. His dad was a head coach. He's a head coach. So I think the other thing with Avonworth too is that the statistics are a little bit misleading because you look at that, you're like, points per game, points against per game. You're like, wow, they're giving up a ton of points. But a lot of those points against came because they had to play Thomas Jefferson, who is the WPIAL 4A champions, and Aliquippa, who is the defending state champions in non-conference play. So they gave up like 45 points to both of those teams. So other than that, they've been very solid on defense. And now in this playoff run that they're on, they beat Amani Christian, who had an offense averaging like 45 points a game. They beat them 14-8 or 14-6. They only gave up one touchdown. So they held them to one touchdown last week. And then they shut out a Central Valley team that was also averaging close to 30 points a game and had two really explosive running backs. So I think for Avonworth, it's more just what they can do in the trenches with, the line that they have up front, that gets things done for them. They don't necessarily have a dominant skill position player.
Yeah. Sometimes that's good. Sometimes it's bad. I mean, a lot of times teams almost require a transcendent type of player to get them, to somebody that can lean on to get them to, a championship. And but the team concept there, where the wealth is spread around. Obviously depends a lot on philosophy too. Some coaches like that bell cow kind of running back, and that's who they're going to feed the rock to until the guy can't walk. And others are ones that are going to spread it around and make sure that 3 and 4 guys, get the carries because of, obviously the wear and tear, during a season.
Yeah. And I should mention Nicholas Englemore and Peter Bonnet. They've got two linemen in the trenches that both have, one of them's got an offer from Robert Morris. One of them has an offer from Miami of Ohio. So, kind of in that FCS, low end FBS kind of range. But it's, at this level, when you get two linemen like that, you can go out and plow guys over. And that's what they've been able to do the last few weeks. So we'll see how they match up against Penn Cambria. Penn Cambria, at least on paper, looks like a fairly balanced team. Have a 1,600-yard quarterback, 1,100-yard rusher, but they've never been here before. This was their first district title, right? They'd never even won a district title before. So Avonworth has been on the cusp of it for a few years, whereas Penn Cambria, they're kind of playing with house money here, and this is their first foray into this level. So looking back at the statewide bracket too, Northwestern Lehigh lost in the state championship game last year. Feels like, Bruce and I have talked about this too, that Danville's been a team that's been close for a few years, but just like hasn't quite gotten past Wyomissing, or, hasn't quite gotten past that quarterfinal level too often. But it seems like they've been a team that's put together some pretty good regular seasons. One question I had on them for you guys, that Danville played a couple close games so far this playoff run. They close one against Lewisburg, a couple other close games in the regular season, whereas Northwestern Lehigh kind of blew everyone out. So do you think that gives Danville a slight advantage in a closer game, that they know what it takes to win those close games? These are two undefeated teams over on the east half of the bracket.
Yeah, it's a great question. I know for a fact, like Northwestern Lehigh, their starters didn't play 4 quarters until the last game against Southern Lehigh, who, by the way, is in the Final Four in their bracket.
In the 4A.
Yeah. And you're right that, Danville might be more battle tested in those close games. But I think overall, if the Northwestern Lehigh is going to win a state title, it will be their defense, because their defense has been playing at a high level week after week. They're getting better and better.
Yeah, and I think that you really have two different scenarios in East and West, just as you talked about. In the West, with those teams that have never been there before. Okay. Thankfully, they're both in that situation, really. Emotionally, and I'm just going to focus on emotion. Okay. Emotionally, these teams are, they have no idea what they're going up against. So I think that emotionally they're going to have a difficult time, or would have a difficult time, playing against the team who had been there before. So equal footing. And on the east side, it's teams that have been there before. Okay, that their goals have yet to be achieved. Okay, that they still have emotions left in the tank, that their goals have not been really attained. So I think that it's a tale of two brackets, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens when each of these brackets meet at Cumberland Valley that way. I think emotionally, each side of the bracket is going to be on a completely different wavelength.
Yeah, I mean, I think last year we could all agree we thought Bell Vernon was going to be the team to win the state title, and they did. This year, really, any of the four can win it this year.
And whoever wins it, it'll be their first state title in school
Yeah.
history, because none of these
Yeah.
teams have ever won one before.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of new faces this year.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yep. On to 4A, where Thomas Jefferson won the WPIAL championship 2 weeks ago, and this past week just blew out Clearfield from District 9. And Bruce, I know you were covering that LS Wyoming game, or what? Sorry, LS Wyomissing game, which was another close one after they played a close one earlier this year. And then Bonner Prendy out of District 12 got by Pope John Paul. And Dave, the game you just mentioned with Southern Lehigh blowing out Juniata. So TJ just blew out Clearfield. It wasn't even close. I'll let you guys talk about the other games that happened, and then we can get into breaking down the next matchups.
Well, the LSY missing game, I talk about endings in football being cruel. I mean, it just was brutal. You had friends that said that that Wyomissing really took this loss hard. This was an overtime loss, and boy, it was just everything just emotionally came spilling out. And but LS, they just continue to keep moving forward, still undefeated. Obviously playing a really tough team there in Thomas Jefferson. I believe they're playing out in Mansion Park.
Yes,
I think so, yeah.
yeah.
Mansion Park is the graveyard of District 3 football, or it has been. And that, so it's really look, it's equidistant for both teams, but for whatever reason, Whitfield teams have had District 3's number, out there at Mansion Park. Bonner's only two losses this year are to LaSalle College and St. Joe Prep. I mean, they've dispatched everybody else, including Pope John Paul II, who, in my mind, was, just a great football team. Dave, what's your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, listen, Bonner, they have a great running back in Mick Johnson, their quarterback, Noel Campbell. They have a nice program. Listen, both Bonner and Southern Lehigh, this is uncharted waters. They've never gone this far. Um, I think Bonner might have the edge on Southern Lehigh. But for Southern Lehigh, in last week, it was Sean Stecker who had 200 and I think 19 yards rushing and four touchdowns in that game. He's really been coming on lately and really all year, but lately he's really been give me the ball, and he seems to get stronger and stronger as the game goes. So for Bonner, they need to try to slow him down and make Southern Lehigh one-dimensional.
Well, we had Jack Muldoon, Bonner
Mm-hmm.
Prendy's head coach on
Yep.
Fresh Set of Downs earlier this year. You could tell he had a lot of confidence in his team. He said, we don't care who we play. Let's just strap it up and play. So you could really get a feel for the fact that this team and that the coach really felt that they had something special this season, and they're proving it right now. That's for sure.
Yeah, and to let Ian know, you know, this year, Bonner, Cardinal O'Hara, Father Judge, even Roman, they're all lumped in with St. Joe's Prep, LaSalle. And, I know at first they didn't want to go that direction, but they did. Um, to play competition like that, I guess will get you battle tested for this playoff run because it's showing for, obviously for Bonner.
Yeah, and Bonner also beat Roman Catholic
Yeah,
earlier this year, who's
gave
like a
Roman
5A
back-to-back losses.
semifinalist.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
and I did get a note from our buddy Chris Elm. He said that Avonworth lost to looks like Southern Columbia in
Yeah.
2019.
Yep.
yes,
Yeah, that was
yep,
right before Avonworth moved up to 3A.
Right.
They
yeah,
won the WPIAL title, made a run, but even so they have been to the state championships before and got beat by Southern Columbia, like everyone pretty much has done in the 2A championship game. So talking about this 4A semifinal at Mansion Park between TJ and LS,
Mm.
These teams are both pretty balanced. I think TJ, the numbers make it look like they run more, but they're pretty balanced offensively. TJ's head coach Bill Chirpak has now won more WPIAL titles at 10 than any other head coach in WPIAL history. Wow. He's won 5 state titles. He knows how to win games. He's always been a run the ball first kind of coach, and they've got a good line to run behind. Tyler Eber's a sophomore running back. In the playoffs, through the WPIAL playoffs, I think the first round he had like 49 carries. The second round he had 42, and then the WPIAL championship game he only had like 33 carries.
Wow.
But his coach, after that, his coach was like, he's a sophomore and he just like doesn't get tired. He can just come out and keep going. Like he's like, we could give him another 40 carries tonight and he'd be fine. Like he just wants the ball every play, and he doesn't necessarily have breakaway speed, but he's going to grind it out and pick up yards, and they're good enough in the trenches that they just grind teams down. And Braden White, their receiver defensive back, had a great game in the WPIAL title game and had a really big game against Clearfield too. So he's kind of come on over the last few weeks as another playmaker that stepped up. And Luke Costco, their quarterback, is actually a baseball commit to Cincinnati. So he's got a pretty good arm on him too. So this is a TJ team that can win in multiple ways and has done it throughout the season.
Yeah, this is an incredible matchup. LS is trying to get over the hump. I mean, obviously 0-3 in PIAA semifinals. I think the last time I saw, I remember Jersey Shore when they were on their big run that went on to face TJ in the finals a couple years ago. They went through LS and beat LS on LS's home field there. So LS trying to get to uncharted territory.
And I mean, to me, at least looking at it, it seems like for LS, pretty much everything runs through, I'll say, their backfield between their dual threat quarterback and then their running back as well. Basically, if TJ can if TJ's defensive line can control this game and get into the backfield, they can probably make it tough for LS, but no one's really done that to them yet this year either.
Yeah. What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like TJ in this game. They've proven year after year to, they've obviously out of the 4 teams, they've been at the state championship games more than any of those teams. And, I listen, LS is a very good program, but I think historically District 7 is just a little stronger in this bracket.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're right, Dave kind of hit the nail on the head here that the TJ is the team with the pedigree at this point. And you mentioned that this is
Yeah.
the first state semifinal for both Bonner and Southern Lehigh. So, you know, LS has been here before, and 19 and 20 they got to this point, and actually played TJ in 2019. So these teams have met before, but I agree. I think this is TJ's game to lose on this side.
Yeah.
But whoever they face in the state championship game could make for an interesting game.
Yep, clearly.
All right, on to 5A, the final championship game that happened this past weekend at Acrisure Stadium, where Pine Richland just dominated Peters Township. Pine Richland's line, especially their defensive line, was just basically living in Peters Township's backfield. Peters Township's quarterback, Nolan DeLucia, just had no time to throw. He's got a good arm and has some good receivers. Nick McCullough was a kid we talked about a lot, but the real star of the game was Jay Timmons, who was he's the son of Lawrence Timmons, former Pittsburgh Steeler. I forgot to put in his defensive stats for this game, but he really shut down Nick McCullough all game, and that was the difference in the game. That Jay Timmons shut down Nick McCullough, and Nick McCullough couldn't operate on the outside. And then Aaron Strader, Pine Richland's sophomore quarterback, hit 2 really nice touchdown passes, made the best throw of the game on like a 60-yard touchdown bomb to Tanner Cunningham. And for a sophomore, he's got a really nice arm, is a really, really good player. So keep an eye out for Aaron Strader, and not only this year, but in years to come too. And the X factor in these games, the kicking game, Pine Richland's kicker made field goals of 24 and 47 yards, which on the Heinz Field or Acrisure Stadium turf is not the easiest thing. Justin Tucker missed 2 kicks at Acrisure Stadium a few weeks ago. So for Grant Aguirre, a really nice performance, especially hitting that 47-yarder. 9th WPIAL title for Pine Richland all time. And now they head back to the state semifinals in a matchup with Bishop McDevitt. So we'll break that down in a minute. But just to talk about some of the other games here, McDevitt beating Exeter, and then I'll let you guys talk about the games that happened out east with Ruston and Roman winning.
Go ahead, Dave.
Okay. Well, the Ruston game, obviously, it's all about rushing for them. Hayton Lopper, they're their 2 big running backs. And, I'm not surprised they beat Delco. Surprised how that they dominated that game and won easily 34-2. And then Roman Catholic, again, uncharted waters. I was at their first ever state playoff win against East Stroudsburg South a few weeks ago. And, they continue to win. And, they beat, I thought, a very good Hollidaysburg team.
Yeah, again, this is a tale of 2 brackets, okay?
Yeah.
You really have the heavyweight pedigrees in the western side, and on the eastern side, you've got the teams that have never been here before, but are still been quality programs. So, who's gonna break out, I think, between Westchester Ruston and Roman Catholic, I think is a key story. And then obviously we'll talk more here about the Pine Richland McDevitt matchup.
Yeah, and this is a classic District 1 12 matchup, which we're going to see a couple of those this weekend. And I think this will be a very good game. I think if Ruston could continue to run the ball, because Roman Catholic is going to basically do that no huddle, quick offense and try to just run it down the field. They don't give defenses much breaks. So for Ruston, their best defense could be their running game.
Sure.
So it'll be interesting to see this weekend.
Yep.
Yeah, so let's talk about this Pine Richland McDevitt matchup, because this one's just
Did you have any room on these charts for all these
we may need to have 2
Yeah.
screens here.
This is just, these teams are just loaded with tradition and experience at this level. And, for McDevitt moving up from 4A to 5A, obviously hasn't missed a beat. Pine Richland, just a consistent contender every year in the WPIAL, regardless of classification, that they, were contenders in 6A, then they moved down to 5A and were contenders still, and have won state championships at both levels, and now have a lot of young kids on this team with Aaron Strader, the sophomore quarterback, Jay Timmons is a junior receiver defensive back, and McDevitt, Stone Saunders is now the all-time leading passer in Pennsylvania history, I believe, or is close to it, right?
He's
Close to it.
He needed 475 yards going into last week's game, and I don't know exactly how much he got last week, but it's a story within the story, and that they've got to keep playing for him to get the record, and so very interesting there.
Yeah, and these are both teams that have dynamic offenses, have good defenses, and at the end of the day, I think it's going to come down to
tremendous coaching. Jeff Wechter for Bishop McDevitt is a Hall of Famer, and John Ladon. I mean, there is how do you find any weakness?
Yeah, it's this one has all the makings of another classic, and Pine Richland's played in some classic games before, going back to that Governor Mifflin game that they won, and a couple other really exciting games they've played.
And not to belittle that Governor Mifflin game there too, but we actually had Eric Kasparowicz admit that they have a thing, all the Pine Richland coaches there have this thing where on the anniversary of their win of Governor Mifflin, it's kind of like when the Miami Dolphins will have a drink to celebrate the fact of when somebody loses. Those Pine Richland coaches actually call one another on that date because of that win over Governor Mifflin in the state semifinal a couple years ago, which is crazy.
Yeah, they have a little text chat where they all text each other Happy Mifflin Day.
Happy Mifflin Day.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So anyway, I digress, but anyway.
Yeah, and I think this game's going to come down to depth, because I think at the top, with Stone Saunders at quarterback, with Aaron Strader, what he can do at quarterback, Jay Timmons is arguably the best defensive back in the whole WPIAL, and he can match up with one of McDevitt's receivers. But does Pine Richland have another cornerback that can match up with McDevitt's other receiver? Whoever they put Timmons on, they've got multiple receivers that can beat you. So, pass rush is always important in these games. Kicking is always important in these games. But I think this is a game that's really going to test the depth of both teams.
Well, McDevitt's got the depth. Let me tell you. I mean, our buddy Joe Santaliquito talks about, coming at you in waves. Well, that's what McDevitt does. I mean, they're going to throw 3 and 4 running backs at you. On the wideouts, they're not gonna target any one particular one of their wideouts. Their back end defense is incredible. As you talked about, I mean, they're gonna come at you in waves, McDevitt, and the depth that they've got, my oh my, I mean, they've got it really. I'm not aware of any position that doesn't have somebody too deep that is of high quality.
Yeah, I mean, this game is a heavyweight fight. I mean, you have two contenders that both have belts. You want to have one champion. When I saw this matchup, I had to circle it. This is by far a heavyweight battle, and both have won state titles. Both have won numerous district championships. A lot of history on both sides. A lot of talent. This is going to be a great game. I'm excited to see this one.
Yeah.
How about you, Ian? What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is the game of the week in the state.
Yeah, absolutely.
This semifinal game. And, the other side, like you guys talked about, Ruston and Roman Catholic both appearing in the state semis for the first time, whereas on the, I guess, quote unquote, west side of the bracket, we've got a matchup of two teams that have both been here and done it before, and it's just dripping with history and tradition. So should be a very good matchup overall. And Pine Richland's a team too that is very, very solid all around. They don't necessarily have that D1 recruit anywhere on the field. They've got some really good players, but not necessarily anyone that is gonna blow your socks off, right? Like, Jay Timmons, who's a junior, he's got an offer from Pitt and West Virginia so far. So a couple D1 offers, but like their kicker's got an Akron offer. Aaron Strader, their sophomore quarterback, has a Central Michigan offer. So like a couple guys, but they're not a team that, like some of the Pine Richland teams in the past, had 5, 6, 7, 8 guys that you knew were going to D1 schools. They're just a very solid all around team that plays good team football, and they'll rush the passer, they'll get after it on defense and swarm to the ball and have a good back end with Jay Timmons.
Well, since you brought up special teams, it is the glaring advantage for Pine Richland. Bishop McDevitt's kicker was hurt a couple of weeks ago. Last week against Exeter, 2 different kickers went 0 for 4 on extra points. And punting, they didn't punt against Exeter. I don't think I've seen them punt in the 2 playoff games. But they throw Stone Saunders back there. Look, the special teams is the reason why Bishop McDevitt lost to Dallas last year in the state semifinal. Okay. Up until this point of the season, McDevitt had kind of cured that particular problem, but unfortunately now with injury, they're in the same boat. And, when you were talking about how Clairton, I just can't see that Bishop McDevitt is going to attempt an extra point with the kickers that they had. They're going to have to go for 2. I think that is advantage Pine Richland.
Interesting.
Yeah. And let's not forget for Pine Richland too, like the last 2 weeks, they beat a Bethel Park team that was averaging close to 45 points a game, and then beat a Peters Township team that was averaging like 35 points a game. And, both of those teams had pretty dynamic offensive attacks with what they were able to do with, throwing in, running the ball. It wasn't like either of those teams were one-trick ponies. They both had pretty balanced attacks. And for Pine Richland, their only loss this year was against North Allegheny, who lost to Central Catholic in the WPIAL championship game. They beat Central Catholic early in the year. They beat a team out of Ohio in week 0. So they've been a really good team that's also, kind of battle tested against tougher competition. You talked about that with Bonner, that Pine Richland played the best 2 6A teams out of the WPIAL and lost one game on a touchdown pass with like 35 seconds left, and beat the other team. So,
Bishop McDevitt didn't play anybody in their own classification until the postseason. They played all 6A teams in the Mid-Penn Commonwealth. Their losses were to Harrisburg in overtime by 3, and then to State College like 58-55.
Yeah. Well, that's a good segue though, because State College just played Central Catholic in the 6A quarterfinals, and Central just blew them out. And Central did exactly what they did against North Allegheny, actually, threw a touchdown pass to Bradley Gompers on the first play, and then just started handing it off to Elijah Faulkner and just ground them down and wore them out and overwhelmed them on defense. And State College had a really explosive offense. They had just put up 75 points the week before, and for Central Catholic to hold them to 3 touchdowns, and moving on now to face Harrisburg in the 6A semifinals, that the other half of the bracket, and St. Joe's Prep's probably going to win, whatever. Downingtown West, nice story out of District 1, but I don't know. I'm kind of bored with St. Joe's Prep winning all the time. But, the exciting game here is the Central Catholic Harrisburg game. So we can talk about that one first, where Central is a completely different team now than they were early in the year when they lost their first 2 games. They lost to, one of those all-star teams out of Maryland that has 20 D1 kids on it. And then they lost to Pine Richland in week 1, but they're a completely different team. Jair Walls, their quarterback's really stepped up over the last half of the season. He was a new starter at the beginning of the year, so they were trying to work in some things. Elijah Faulkner has been there for a few years now as the running back. Bradley Gompers is a Duke committed linebacker, also plays some receiver tight end for them. He's their leading receiver. And then Xavier Thomas is a defensive back recruit for Penn State. So this Central team has a lot of, D1 talent caliber players on it. And, that's just talking about the headline guys. They've got a lot of other guys down the list too. This is a really good Central Catholic team. And one, Dave, to kind of go back a little bit in history too. Bruce and I have talked about this, but in 2020, the last time Central won a WPIAL title, their state playoff game against Erie McDowell, they had to forfeit because of COVID. That was the COVID year, when if you had so many players get sick, you couldn't play, whatever it was. So Central that year felt like they had a team capable of making it to, I guess, Hershey back then, and never got to play. And they did feel like they kind of got robbed out of a run, right? Those players were WPIAL champions, but never got to play in a state level game that year. And then the last couple of years, they came up short, lost in the WPIAL championship game 3 straight years. And now they finally got back on top of the mountain. They won the WPIAL title, and now they've got their sights set on making a run all the way to the state finals.
So, Bruce, you've seen Harrisburg.
Yeah.
Thoughts on this matchup?
I was on the field for the game last week and broadcast the game the week before. So, look, Harrisburg, the same thing as Central Catholic. This isn't the same team now that started the year. Completely different team. And they run a heavy package with 2 Penn State recruits in the backfield. They put Kevin Brown, their commit tackle, at fullback, and he leads for Messiah Mickens, and just it's crazy. And they line him up, Kevin Brown anyway, at center sometimes if they're going to run a draw for the quarterback. I mean, he's like a most valuable player out there. But just some of the things with Harrisburg. One of the things too is Elias Koch, or their wide receiver. He came up gimpy a bit at the end of the Wilson game, so everybody's going to keep their eye on that to see whether or not he's able to play. Jayon Lewis, he's not the passer that Sean Lee was. He's a sophomore, but he's had Koch to throw to. That is, that could be a little bit some difficulty there too. But the one thing that Harrisburg really had is improved special teams. They were ones that always had that Achilles heel of special teams, and Coach Everett has kind of flipped that. Now this is reliant on Koch, but Koch and his ability to punt the ball and flip the field is amazing. I saw him 50, 60-yard kicks in that, and their extra points, spot on. So it's going to be, Harrisburg, their MO is they've got to run the football, and they supplement it with passing, but watch them in the return game. They've got dynamic guys that can return kicks and punts. So
it should be a good game. I think Harrisburg, like you said, with their quarterback unfortunately finding out, what that week that they couldn't play. I think they've gotten better each week, and this is going to be a tough challenge because Central Catholic, they're like Ian said, they're a really good program.
I talked to Eric Epler, who covered the Central Catholic State College game
Hmm.
and he just he was shaking his head. I mean, he
Yeah.
was totally impressed with Central Catholic and their performance. So and I take Eric's opinion obviously very seriously, and
Hmm.
and if Dave will let me, I'll probably make the big drive up to
Oh yeah.
Altoona for Saturday afternoon to cover this game for Eastern PA football. It's that to me, it's that big because first off, I've always said and Ian knows this. I've said all along that Pennsylvania football is a lot better when Pittsburgh Central Catholic is relevant, and so I want to go and see them play. I want to see Harrisburg, and I think it's going to be a great game. I think it's going to be one of the most physical games that I will have seen in some time.
Agreed.
And it sounds to me like, from what you've said about Harrisburg wanting to run the ball, that the real matchup here is going to be between Harrisburg's rushing attack and Central Catholic's linebackers. Bradley Thomas, or not Bradley Thomas, I was looking at two different guys. Bradley Gompers is a Duke commit at linebacker. He's a senior. Colson Gatton is a junior and has a bunch of D1 offers: Pitt, Wisconsin, Penn State, Duke, Tennessee, Notre Dame, Michigan, Oklahoma. A lot of the big schools have offered him. I think he's a Penn State legacy though. But Colson Gatton, junior linebacker, Ashton Blatt, another junior linebacker, has offers from Michigan State, Syracuse, Duke. So you've got three kids at linebacker with D1 offers for Central Catholic, and can they find a way to slow down that rushing attack of Harrisburg? I think is really going to make the difference. Then on the back end, Xavier Thomas, a defensive back, the Penn State commit. Billy Lech, Central's kicker, has an Akron offer. He's made multiple long field goals this year. So I think I counted. Oh, Roman Thompson was the other guy, linebacker, who's got a couple offers from MAC schools, but he's only a sophomore, so he'll get some playing time too. Central has a really good group of young players. This isn't necessarily like the best senior class that Central has ever had, but when you start these are very good seniors, don't get me wrong, but when you start looking at like the juniors and sophomores that have D1 offers on this Central team, you're like, holy cow, this team's going to be good for a few years to come too.
Harrisburg is got a very unique MO, and that is it's a team that really wants to grind it out on the ground, but has big play capability. And, they've got guys that can take it to the house on any play, but yet what they want to do is to run the football and play keep away, which is very interesting. It's a very interesting concept, one that they play very well. Defensively, Messiah Mickens and this package with Kevin Brown have actually allowed Nehemiah Ewell, who was their primary, running back, down to focus more on defense, which has made him a much better defensive team. So, going to be very interesting. And but I think you got to keep an eye on the Koch injury. He's not only as valuable to him as a receiver, but I mean, like I said, he was flipping the field with his punts and was a real force at strong safety as well. So that's going to be something key to watch as the week goes on.
And looking statewide, obviously the winner here will probably play St. Joe's Prep in the state championship game. And these are all schools other than Downingtown West, who's only in their second state semifinal. These are all schools who have been here a lot before. Central 4-time state champions, Harrisburg in their 5th semi in 9 years, St. Joe's Prep 8-time state champions. So if you guys want to talk a little bit about that Downingtown team, just to kind of give them their fair share before they go get railroaded by St. Joe's Prep.
Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, listen, we all know, I live in the District 11 area. Parkland has played St. Joe's Prep. They came off a district title, and we always end up getting District 12. And in this area, everyone knows that, well, whoever comes out, you got St. Joe's Prep. Um, Same thing with District 1. Week later, whoever wins District 1, and last year I was at the CB South game where, Prep basically rolled them, and look for Prep to do pretty much the same this week. And listen, they're not going anywhere right now. Their
They have a
quarterback's a
lot of good young
sophomore.
players coming up.
Yeah, Charlie Falk, their sophomore quarterback's over 2,000 yards passing. He seems to be getting better week after week. And their best receiver, Marvin Harrison Jr.'s younger brother, who's a
Jet.
freshman, is their leading receiver. And that kid, I mean, he looks already like a all-state senior. So
The catch he
you're
made
gonna
against Imhotep,
oh
which we had a highlight of, and and that it was pretty special. I mean, he's a good player, and then, look, he's a legacy guy. He's a Philadelphia guy. He's
yeah.
not from parts unknown. He's a Philadelphia kid that's followed his dad and his well, not his dad, but his brother, through the same school there. And yeah, there's some legacy guys like the Saka kid who's going to Notre Dame, um, what have you. But I think that St. Joe Prep is much more of a rather than a star-studded team. I think that it is a team that is really they play at a very high level with one another. I think that their level of execution is unmatched.
And
In
and 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 they haven't won every state title. I mean, District 7 has beat them twice. And listen, it could be a whole nother show to talk
Yeah, I know, right?
about,
Yeah.
you know, but you have Central Catholic out there. Um, I don't know, are they getting kids from other states? I don't know.
No,
But
they're too
but
far away to get. Yeah.
yeah, but it's
Oh, they're too far
location.
away. Yeah.
You
Well,
have to understand where Prep is. They're right by South Jersey. Some of those South Jersey kids are closer to the school than the Pennsylvania kids. And listen, it's about education. That is the first. But I'll just say this again is knowing the Prep people, it was the PIAA that wanted the Catholic League in. So I'll leave it at that.
and here's the other thing too. Like I said, I think that that's the important reason why Pittsburgh Central Catholic it needs to be relevant is that you need that kind of balance,
Yeah.
okay, on the western side as you do, you know, the eastern side there. And
Well,
you really do. You need that balance. You need that 1 and 1A. You need that rivalry game. And I'll be honest with you, and talking with St. Joe Prep, that's really what they want. Now, their rivalry game for them, internally here is obviously LaSalle College. But
yeah.
having that rivalry game that they could count on, maybe year after year for a state championship, that's what's been lacking. And don't blame them for that. I think that there are a lot of other schools that have that opportunity to, step forward. And I'm glad that Central Catholic has done that this year.
Well, and LaSalle, listen, this year under first year coach Brett Gordon has really closed the gap. And, with Emotep moving up to 6A, obviously it didn't work out for them this year. It's not an easy ride to get out of that district. But I'll just say this to you, Ian, is do you think, since I think they gave Lombardi the okay, and I think more basketball they should, is would they look at doing separating? Because for me, like where I live, so like Notre Dame, which is a Catholic school, they can't compete with those teams. So to me, I've always said go to 5 public classes and have a super conference. What's your thoughts?
So I remember when the state went to 6 classifications, one of the discussion points was should they do, I think they called it a super 700 or something like that, that it was,
Yeah.
and actually here, I'm going to take this off because we're kind of discussing stuff
Yeah,
outside the
sure.
bracket now.
Yeah.
But one of the discussion points was, do we just go to 6 straight classes based on enrollment, or do we go to, the top classes for, schools with 700 or above, and then maybe some of the private schools too. I think one of the difficult things when you start to look at non-boundary schools statewide is the um, the distribution of them is incredibly skewed towards the east. So if you tried to split,
you can't.
If you tried to split
you
them,
couldn't.
you couldn't. No. So
Yeah.
actually, this won't surprise
Yeah,
Bruce at all. I do have a list. I have it in a spreadsheet because of course I do, right? So all right, we'll see if this is too small to read or not. But I did kind of pencil it out. If you split teams, I actually did this on 2 private classifications. So a big private class and a small private class.
Nice.
So, and then 4 public classes. So I don't know if that's too small to see. I can make it.
No, we can see it. I think
you can
good.
see it.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Okay. So, but you can see too that I tried to split it between East and West, but just, all these District 12 teams, there's 10 big District 12 teams, plus add in, Shanahan and Pope John Paul from District 1. And then all of a sudden, like there's not that many out west. Like North Catholic here is a 3A team. Central Catholic's the only 6A team.
Well, Guilfoyle's out of District 6, which is
right, but they're small, so they would be they would be in the small private schools actually work, as you can see, pretty evenly to split. You could basically do like District 6, 7, and 10 in one group, and then 1, 2, 3, 11, and 12 in another group. So the small private schools it would work for to do a small private class. But then also like to me, they're in the WPIAL, right? You just want to talk private schools in the WPIAL. You have Central Catholic that's a 6A school. There's no other non-boundary school that's bigger than 3A. There's 11 total in the WPIAL. All 10 other ones are 3A or smaller. So there's no way you could put a 1A school in a conference or on the field with Central Catholic in, any kind of game, right? You're not going to put, you're not going to put a Bishop Canavan or a Sarah Catholic that has like, I put the enrollment numbers on here, right?
You wouldn't even put them against even a normal public school either.
Yeah, like you wouldn't put Sarah Catholic with 78 male students on the field with, a Central Catholic that has, 550 basically, right? Because this is just the 9th, 10th, 11th enrollment too, so more than that. So I think that for me in the WPIAL is the struggle, that if you split public and private apart, you're basically exiling Central Catholic and then saying, okay, we can have a group of small private schools that it can work for. It can work for those small schools here. But you're basically saying splitting the private schools out basically is just exiling Central Catholic from the WPIAL. It is essentially
I think that that's people that want public and private are trying to do that. I mean, they're trying to exile the non-boundary schools, so that
the other thing,
and I don't think it'll work in football, basketball. I think it would, but you could add the interact if you were gonna make a super conference, bring the Interact, bring the Malvern Preps, those teams down there, and that adds another, whatever, 6 programs at different classes.
Yeah.
Um,
There's a
but
whole nother level of non-participating PIAA schools that could get factored into this too, okay? Where to help create that championship, that you have boundary and non-boundary, but the non-boundary but the non-boundary schools could then include the Interact, and then you've got something.
Yeah. I think
and
the
and
only
I
way
think go
for
ahead.
football that it would work
Mhm.
is if you played a normal regular season and had normal district championships and then said, okay, we're going to have a statewide playoff bracket based on some kind of power ranking system where you're not plugging in the district champions at different points in the state bracket, that you figure out your district, kind of like basketball does, right? You figure out your district champions, and then you say, okay, we're going to have statewide brackets to determine state champions, and we're going to separate public and private schools for these statewide brackets, but let them still play in their regular district titles, right? So Pope John Paul could still compete for the District 1 title. Central Catholic could still compete for the WPIAL title. But then after that, split them out. And then honestly, then you could go back to 4 classifications, because you could do what Illinois does for their statewide bracket, which is you say what Illinois does is they say, here's all the teams that qualify, and they have some formula to figure out who qualifies, right? So Illinois ranks every team that qualifies for the state bracket. And then I think they have 6 classifications. So then they order them all by enrollment, and the top 1/6 biggest are the 6A teams. And then the next 1/6 are the 5A teams, and so on and so forth. So in theory, depending on who all qualifies, you could have a school that plays in a 5A tournament one year and a 6A tournament the next year, just based on like how many teams qualify for a statewide tournament, which is an interesting way to do it. But
I still don't think that there's not enough non-boundary schools to run separately.
And just because of the difference in size with them, you almost have to do 2 groups of non-boundary schools, a big school and a small school. And then I think I've said for a while, I think 5 is actually the right number of classifications for Pennsylvania, not 6. But that's inclusive of everyone. If you're splitting them out,
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think you could do 2, a big private and a small private, and then 4 of public schools. But I think 6 or 5 overall would work a lot better than 6.
I think if you did something like that, shorten the season a week or so, and then you might be able to work the schedule out, because like Bruce said, there's just not enough teams that
there's not enough to get a fair representation of good competition.
But if you made that, say, super conference, and you had enough teams, you would have to shorten the season, which I'm sure some people would like to do.
All right. Well, let's finish out. Did we finish the 6A bracket?
Yeah, we did. We finished the 6A bracket. That's pretty much all that I had. The only other thing, just real quickly, is just a breakdown of teams from which districts made it this far to the state semifinals. Wow. So a decent representation, but 3 districts not represented. Last year we had District 8 was in the mix because of Westinghouse. District 10, no representatives. No Cathedral Prep this year. No one else no Farrell. But District 9 getting 2 teams to this point, and then
spreading the wealth.
Yeah, spreading it around quite a bit as well. And then I always like to give a plug. Check out our affiliate shows. So this was kind of a combined WPIAL Blitz Fresh Set of Downs, but you can check out the archives of both WPIAL Blitz and Fresh Set of Downs show on the YouTube channel. And then my Steel City Blitz podcast, we're actually recording tomorrow night to talk about the Steelers.
Nice.
So we're doing that.
Good luck with that.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
But yeah, you can tune in. I always say at this point, I've talked a lot, but if you want to hear me talk more, you can tune in and tomorrow night to our Steel City Blitz show. We're on live on YouTube at 10 o'clock tomorrow night, or check us out on any other platform.
Nice.
And next week we'll have our once again combined WPIAL Blitz Fresh Set of Downs Championship Edition. We're shooting for, I think we decided Monday night at 8:45, give or take.
Yep. Sounds good.
We'll shoot for that, see who else we can get on, and that's it. So thanks everyone for joining us tonight. It was a blast as always. And any other parting thoughts as we head to the state semifinals, guys?
Well, I just want to say great job, Drake. Great job with everything you put together. You made the show interesting with all your statistics. You are definitely the Mr. Statistics, and I'm looking forward to next week. And I guess we'll give our picks, and Bruce and I will be out in Cumberland Valley. We'll be doing a halftime show of each game on EPA Football Twitter. So catch us there, and we'll bring you a lot of coverage from Cumberland Valley.
Yeah, it's and for me this week, we'll be covering some games for I think NFHS Network. I think I'm going to be probably doing a game with them, a state semifinal, and then Saturday I'm really looking forward to. Look, it's 6 hours round trip for me, but being able to be on the field there for Harrisburg and Pittsburgh Central Catholic, is going to be pretty special for me. So, I'll try and get out there and do that. But it's been a lot of fun covering the postseason here, this year. And the best is yet to come, which is,
It is.
That's a little bit tough. I stand on the sidelines of these games and I see everybody, like one team that's so, emotionally uplifted, and then the other is completely devastated. And for me, I'm still on the crescendo of, moving on, and it sometimes it's a little tough, but overall it's so much fun to be able to have that opportunity.
Absolutely.
All right, well, that does it for the WPIAL Blitz Show, Fresh Set of Downs, PIAA Podcast Supreme, I guess we'll call it. But anyway, for Ian and Dave, I'm Bruce Badgley. Hey, we're back next Monday at 8:45 p.m. for our big extravaganza on the state championships. Until then, drive safely, everybody. See ya.